I was always the forgotten daughter, the walking disappointment, the one who never did anything right in my family's eyes. My name is Helena. I'm 32 years old, and my entire life I carried the weight of being the black sheep of the Almia family. While my sister Beatrice shined as a successful lawyer married to an influential businessman, living in a mansion in the city's finest neighborhood, I chose to be a literature teacher at a public school. My brother Ricardo followed in our father's footsteps in the family's real estate empire, driving imported cars and closing million-dollar deals. And me? I lived in a rented 40 square meter apartment, took the bus everywhere, and was considered the family failure. Every Christmas dinner was torture. Every birthday party was a reminder of how much I had disappointed everyone. My mother would look at me with that mix of pity and shame, as if wondering where she went wrong with me. My father simply ignored me as if I were invisible, a stain on the perfect portrait of the Almeida dynasty. But the worst part wasn't the contempt or the comparisons. It was the loneliness, being surrounded by family and feeling completely alone, like a stranger at a table of people who shared my blood, but not my values, not my dreams, not my essence. I learned to smile through the pain, to nod when they made jokes about my modest salary, to stay silent when they questioned my life choices. I became a ghost in my own family, present in body but absent in their hearts. Then, 6 months ago, my father died. 78 years old, massive heart attack in his office while reviewing contracts. I found out through a text message in the family group chat. Not a phone call, not a personal word, just a cold message sent to everyone at once. At the funeral, I stood in the back while Beatrice and Ricardo received condolences, played the role of devastated children, shed tears that seemed more theatrical than genuine. I cried too, but not for the father I had lost. I cried for the father I never had, for the relationship that never existed, for the love that was never given. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. I almost didn't go. What was the point? I knew exactly what would happen. Beatrice and Ricardo would inherit everything: the properties, the businesses, the investments, the legacy. I would probably get some symbolic gesture, maybe a small amount of money, enough for them to say they didn't forget me completely, but not enough to matter. I arrived at the lawyer's office wearing my only decent black dress, the same one I wore to the funeral. Beatrice was there in designer clothes, diamonds glittering on her fingers. Ricardo wore a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. They barely acknowledged my presence. The lawyer, Mr. Santos, a stern man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, opened a thick leather folder and began to read. First came the small bequests, some valuable paintings to family friends, a vintage car collection to Ricardo, jewelry to Beatrice, shares in various companies divided between them. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, waiting for my name to be mentioned, preparing myself for whatever crumbs they had decided to throw my way. Then Mr. Santos cleared his throat, looked directly at me, and everything changed. The main estate, the crown jewel of my father's empire, a property portfolio worth over $2 billion, was mine. Every single brick, every contract, every investment account, mine. The room fell into absolute silence. Beatrice's face turned white, then red, then purple. Ricardo stood up so violently his chair fell backward. They started shouting, demanding explanations, accusing the lawyer of fraud, of forgery, of conspiracy. But Mr. Santos remained calm, producing document after document, all legally binding, all authentic, all signed by my father with witnesses present. Then he handed me a letter. My father's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. I opened it with trembling hands and began to read. He wrote that he had been wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. For years, he had valued the wrong things, praised the wrong achievements, loved the wrong way. He had built an empire but failed at being a father. He had given Beatrice and Ricardo everything they wanted and watched them become entitled, greedy, and shallow. They loved his money, not him. They visited out of obligation, called when they needed something, performed affection like a business transaction. But I, the daughter he ignored, the one he dismissed, had become something he never expected. A person of integrity. Someone who chose purpose over profit, who valued knowledge over status, who treated people with kindness regardless of their wealth. He wrote that he had been watching me for the past 5 years, secretly, through a private investigator. He knew about the after-school program I started for underprivileged kids. He knew I spent my weekends volunteering at a homeless shelter. He knew I had given my modest savings to help a student's family pay for cancer treatment. He knew I had never once asked him for money, never once tried to manipulate him, never once pretended to be something I wasn't. The letter said that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in character, and I was the richest of his children. He apologized for realizing it too late, for all the years he wasted, for all the pain he caused. The empire was mine not as a gift, but as a responsibility. He trusted me to use it wisely, to make it mean something beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, holding a letter from a father I thought never loved me, learning that he saw me all along. That in the end, when it truly mattered, he chose me. Beatrice threatened lawsuits. Ricardo called me names I won't repeat. They stormed out, promising to fight this, to destroy me, to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because of the money, though I won't pretend billions of dollars don't change everything, but because I finally had proof that being true to myself, staying authentic, even when it cost me everything, was the right choice. The irony is almost poetic. They spent their entire lives chasing my father's approval, molding themselves into what they thought he wanted, sacrificing their authenticity for inheritance. And I, who wanted nothing from him, who built a life completely separate from his wealth and influence, inherited everything. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've transformed the company. 40% of profits now go to educational and social programs. I've created scholarships, funded schools, built community centers. The Almeida Empire is no longer just about accumulating wealth, but about redistributing it, about using privilege to create opportunities for those who never had them. Beatrice and Ricardo tried to contest the will. They lost. Now they don't speak to me at all, which honestly feels like another inheritance, the gift of peace. I still teach, though I could retire tomorrow. I still live modestly, though I could buy anything, because the money didn't change who I am. It just gave me the resources to become more fully myself. Being the black sheep saved me. While they were busy performing, I was busy becoming. And in the end, that made all the difference. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my father had loved me openly, if he had chosen me from the beginning instead of at the end. Would I have become like them? Would I have learned to measure my worth in dollar signs and social status? Would I have lost myself trying to fit into their golden cage? The truth is, rejection was my greatest teacher. Every dismissive look, every cruel comparison, every moment of being overlooked forced me to find worth within myself rather than in their approval. They gave me designer clothes and luxury cars, but those things became their identity. I had nothing but myself, so I had to build something real, something that couldn't be bought or inherited or taken away. My father's letter said he was proud of me, but here's what I wish I could tell him now. I don't need his pride anymore. I needed it desperately when I was 7 years old, and he missed my school play. I needed it at 15 when he forgot my birthday. I needed it at 22 when I graduated with honors and he didn't show up. But I don't need it now. Because I've learned the most liberating truth of all. The people who reject you don't get to define you. Their inability to see your value says everything about them and nothing about you. I built a life they didn't understand, and in doing so, I built a life they couldn't touch. Last week, I ran into my mother at a charity gala. She approached me cautiously, almost nervously, and told me she was sorry. Sorry for the years of disappointment in her eyes. Sorry for choosing sides. Sorry for not defending me. I looked at this woman who gave me life but never really saw me, and I felt something unexpected, compassion. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but compassion. Because I realized she was a victim too, trapped in a value system that measures human worth in achievements and bank statements. Unable to see that the daughter who embarrassed her was actually the daughter who freed herself. Here's what being the black sheep taught me. And what I want every person who's ever felt rejected by their own family to understand. Sometimes the people who should love you most are the least equipped to recognize your value. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to walk away from their version of success to discover your own. Sometimes being the disappointment is actually being the only one brave enough to be real. My siblings have money, status, and approval. They won the game they were taught to play, but they lost themselves in the process. They became exactly what was expected of them, and in doing so, they became nothing more than expensive copies of our parents' dreams. I became myself. Messy, imperfect, financially struggling, but undeniably, authentically myself. And when the moment of truth came, when my father finally had to choose what mattered most, he chose authenticity over performance. He chose substance over style. He chose me. Not because I won some game, but because I refused to play it at all. So if you're the black sheep, if you're the one who doesn't fit, if you're the disappointment who chose passion over prestige, purpose over profit, meaning over money, hear this. You're not broken. You're not wrong. You're not the failure they say you are. You're the only one free. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day they'll realize that you weren't the one who was lost. They were. And by then, you'll be so far ahead on your own path, so deeply rooted in your own truth, that their realization won't even matter anymore. Because you'll already know what they're just discovering, that the only inheritance worth having is the one you give yourself. The courage to be who you really are, no matter the cost. That's the real fortune. Everything else is just money,